Hey guys, this is Buford Mobley with the Soccer Parent Lifestyle, and today we have a very special guest. He's a friend, and he's going to talk to us about training and development, especially with training your own kids. His name is Neil Crawford. Neil, welcome.
Thank you, Buford, and thanks for having me, man.
Oh, not a problem. All right, well let's get right into it. I know you're big on training your kids at home. What are some of the pros and cons of doing that?
Yeah, and so even before we jump into that, I want to frame this properly. It's not necessarily that I'm big on training my own kids at home. It's that I recognize that it would be borderline unfair, from my opinion, to place them in a highly competitive environment without at least attempting to equip them with the physical and mental skill set to compete. And part of that is training them. But there's a lot more that goes into it than simply working with them on the ball. So now that we've framed it that way, I will go on to say, because there are a lot of ways to enjoy the game of soccer, a whole lot of ways. But if you're going to go into this competitive environment, then I felt like it just needed a little bit more than just attending a team practice. And so the way I describe it in my podcast is I'll call it MEE, M-E-E-E, minimum extra effort with a degree of enthusiasm. So to play club soccer requires a minimum extra effort with a degree of enthusiasm. And I decided and explained it to my sons as they got a little older that I would meet you where you were at. And so that's a good segue into the pros and cons. Well, one of the big cons is obviously when you're training your own kid, familiarity breeds contempt. They get frustrated. You get frustrated. And there's a lot of science around it as well. It's not just like you're irrational. There's a lot of science when that goes into the relationship between a parent and a child. I think they call it mirroring. It's a whole topic around mirroring. You see something, you see your child doing something, and you actually feel it, and it frustrates you or it makes you really excited, right? So you have to be aware of that. You also have to be aware that once you decide to go down this road of working with your own child, you take the pie chart of soccer. So if the pie chart of soccer is 100% fun, now that pie chart is no longer 100% fun. And the way I describe it, and again in the podcast, is now that pie chart goes from instant gratification. So every time they play with you and do something with you at home, it's instantly gratifying, to now it's a mix of instant gratification and delayed gratification. And what you're banking on is that delayed gratification effort that they put in is going to result in a longer and more fulfilling enjoyment of the game. But if you get that balance wrong, then the frustration, the potential burnout, all of that creeps in. Another con is, quite frankly, most people, not just parents, and it doesn't matter how long you played, there's no rule book for training anyone, but definitely your own child. So it takes a lot of time, energy, and investment in order to learn what to do, especially if you're like me, though, and you didn't grow up playing the game. And so all of those cons were the motivation behind the online training program I created called Anytime Soccer Training, because it has the entire curriculum all in one place. And every video is 100% follow along, and every video is relatively short. you still have to have the human interaction. So I call it human plus technology is better than human or technology. But at least you have a framework to help you get started. It's so easy for me to intertwine what I do at Anytime Soccer Training with the problems and the reality, because Anytime Soccer Training is just a reflection of challenges that I was tackling. So how long to train? Your kids, they don't want to train too long on one specific thing. That's why the videos are short. Me giving them a lot of instructions frustrates them. That's why it has slow motion demonstrations. It has to be followed along because I wanted them to develop a sense of autonomy over time. So that's one of the advantages. Another big advantage, and then I'll put back to you, Buford, is I did not want to create a situation where the only time my children were getting better in a deliberate way was when someone else was getting paid. That's a long way of saying your development, the biggest driver of your own personal development, whether it be soccer, whether it be business, whether it be any personal endeavor that you have, it doesn't matter. The biggest driver is you. You as the individual. It starts with you, it ends with you. And everybody else around you, your great coaches, your parents, your trainers, they are there to support you. And I saw, and then this is my own personal opinion, when my sons got into club soccer, I saw it's too strong of a word to say disturbing, but I saw this subculture of, we want our child to get better, so let's go immediately and find a trainer that can solve this problem. I am a trainer. I love my trainers. I've coached. I love my coaches. But if the only time that you're getting better is when someone else is either volunteering their time or being paid, you're just not going to reach your full potential. And you're not going to have, in my opinion, you're not going to have the mindset of self-determination that I wanted for my children.
All right. Well, now going to your app, I know at Anytime Soccer Training, you guys have a training app, and there are a lot of them on the market. In general, if parents are looking for a training app to help their child, what should they be looking for?
Yeah. So a lot of what you're going to look for will be specific to your needs. We at Anytime Soccer Training try to tick a lot of boxes. But let me preference this by saying anytime foot is on the ball, your child is going to improve. So I don't want to position Anytime Soccer Training as more effective, less effective, whatever, than other programs, but it does address a need that was not being addressed when I started. So the first thing is I recommend a comprehensive program. When people train, whether it be with a trainer or a parent, there are human biases that creep in. There are a few of them, like they favor things that they're familiar with, or they work on things that they're kind of strong at, or they favor one foot over the other. There are a lot of biases, right? Well, a comprehensive technology program helps remove some of these biases. Another bias that we wanted to address is they don't work on a specific skill long enough. So the technology doesn't care. The technology says we're going to work on these skills in a logical progression. So, but the number one thing besides the technology is getting buy-in from the player. And so I did a podcast where I called it 180 seconds. So the average video at Anytime Soccer Training is a little less than 5 minutes, and it has breaks, has an intro, and that kind of stuff. So after you distill all that down as interval based, it ends up being about 180 seconds of technical training. So my conversation with parents who say, hey, we're struggling to get our kid to stay consistent is just ask them to give you 180 seconds. That's 5 minutes a day. And you'll see their game change tremendously. So before I would recommend a particular app or particular this, it really has to be, is what do we want to get out of this? And what tools can we place around us to supplement the stuff that we're already doing?
All right. Now, with your app in particular, is there any type of development philosophy you follow?
Yeah. So the first thing is, with any top soccer training or any in-home training program, the first admonishment is I try to narrow the scope of what we're trying to achieve. Very focused on a very specific thing. And this very specific thing that we're focused on is skill acquisition. And what we're really doing is improving the neuroplasticity that governs the motion that effectively allows you to manipulate the ball. And so that philosophy, the philosophy that we are based this on, is maximum repetitions in the shortest amount of time. And we built the curriculum so that it's easy for the child to follow and get these maximum reps. I believe that by having these repetitions at home and getting a tremendous amount of reps, when you put them into a team environment, the player is now able to absorb more in those game and training environments, having now become very technical. The next thing that I looked at is I try to pinpoint those areas that the team training environment just doesn't have enough time to really maximize. And that's around becoming very strong with your non-dominant foot. That's why we have thousands of videos that focus on both feet. Aerial control from all parts of the body, all parts of the body, all parts of the foot, and in totally different situations. This is something, again, the team just doesn't most likely have time to deal with. Rebounder drills. Again, you're going to go to a team environment. They're not going to have time to spend 10 minutes kicking the ball off the wall, but we know how important that is. So the philosophy that we had to summarize it is maximum reps in the shortest amount of time, because we know kids don't want to do it too long, to increase and fire that neuroplasticity so that the kid becomes more technical and acquires skills. Moving at a very slow progression. So again, they don't become overwhelmed, so that they can then benefit more in those team training environments. You'll have a player that's also 2-footed. And that's what we try to do. And then, oh, by the way, it's free to join. And the annual subscription is less than a dinner for two. And that was also personally important to me, because I did not want individual training to be prohibitively expensive for those who wanted it.
All right. Now I'm going to ask you a somewhat loaded question, but what, if anything, do you think is lacking from most clubs' training curriculum?
Yeah, and that's a tough one. Again, every club is going to be different, so I can tell you about my observations of various clubs. I don't think clubs have very many philosophical differences. I think we've kind of hashed that out. We understand young kids' feet need to be on the ball. We understand the importance of small-sided games. We kind of understand the importance of technical ability or becoming technical at those smaller ages. We understand the fact that this should be a fun experience. So we try to create competitive gaming programs. So I don't think there's a problem philosophically. What I have seen, however, is the issue is around execution. And let me couch this by saying I don't think it's a moral or ethical issue. In other words, the coaches are, for the most part, are doing the best job they can with the resources they have. So the execution problem comes into a lot of different factors. There are a lot of factors that impact the execution problem. The first problem with execution is our clubs, for the most part, were founded as recreational programs. And then they evolved into what we see today, driven in part by parent demand and player demand. But if you think about it, that chassis of recreational programming is not scalable for an intense developmental training environment. That's a long way of saying we're not organizing the way I would organize a club if development in general, if individual development within a team context was the primary objective. Again, no one's fault. But what do I mean by that? Well, you can have a coach that's been trained, who's been working with kids for 20 years, and that coach is going to get a team, right? Same responsibilities. Maybe they'll add a few extra responsibilities, but in general, that's what they're going to do. And then you'll have another coach that joins, been there for one day. He's going to get a team, and he or she will have the same responsibility as the one that's been there for 20 years. And we haven't said, you know what, we're going to cross-pollinate this, and we're going to focus on functional areas. And then we're going to put people in places where they can be most successful. And it might not be organized around what we consider to be a team. How we group kids as teams is important for recreational because it's just logical. It's also important at the other end of the spectrum for professional sports because you have to have parity. But from a developmental perspective, we should probably organize people around functional areas and players around functional areas, right? My older son is very technical because I train him. So maybe he's in an advanced functional area for technical training. But emotionally, he may not be there. He may be in this functional area for tactical and emotional and play stuff. I'm using this as an example. So the first problem I see is we're not organized in the way that I would organize us if we were really focused on development in that way. The next thing is, what's the best way to say this? Our coaches, like our teachers, are asked to do too much with too little resources and time. So what that means is that the curriculum that's required to develop a player is massive. And when we look to our European counterparts, it's in those top academies, they may have six or seven folks focused on each team. But they're tiny clubs. Maybe Arsenal's 200 people, 250 kids. 6 or 7 people focus on that. Here, we're asking one coach to develop an entire developmental curriculum. And, oh, by the way, deal with the parents and deal with the players' issues and call the teacher, right? And run the practice and do the gaming program. And, oh, by the way, they got more than one team. This is less than ideal based on what we're trying to do. I mean, based on the developmental model. And I'm just giving you the highlights, but I talk about this kind of stuff a lot in the podcast. We don't do a very good job of mitigating what I call conflicts of interest. These are inherent conflicts of interest, meaning everybody can have the best intentions, right? But they're still there. Buford, when you go to the soccer field and you're watching the team with your son on it, who are you thinking about?
I'm thinking about my son.
Bottom line, you're thinking about your son. I'm thinking about my son. Yeah, I want the team to do well. Yeah, I like the coach. But I'm thinking about my child. This is very normal. This is very natural. The coach, hopefully, is thinking about the team. This is very normal. This is very natural. There's a natural conflict of interest there that we haven't done a very good job of mitigating. What do I mean by that? The way popular soccer media and education pins this is an ethical thing. Like I, as a parent, should throw out all the evolutionary history of the world, and for some reason put my interest in my child on the back burner for the purpose of the team, for the greater good of the team. And the coach should be able to manage all of these conflicts of interest. And this is just one. There's another conflict, right? Individual skill development versus the team. There are loads. The player winning is a winning now versus longer term development. These are all inherent conflicts of interest that must be managed. And we haven't done a good job of creating systems that help mitigate these. So an example would be maybe you have a group of coaches who just focus on functional areas that are not part of the team, like a trainer. And therefore, by default, it doesn't matter to them if we win or lose by default, because they don't have custody of a team in that way. Even though they may lend themselves on helping organize a team on Saturdays, they're not really in charge of the team in that way. That would be an example. There are lots of examples, but that would be an example. Or the way we organize our leagues are not conducive to winning versus development. You can't post rankings. You can't post, we went to Jefferson Cup and won, and then turn around and say, yeah, but winning's not that important. This is a very difficult thing. So these I'm rambling here, but these are all issues. So if I had to summarize it, I don't think we're organized in a way that promotes long-term development. I think we're asking our limited staff to do way too much. And I wish we could narrow down what we're asking our coaches to do. And then we haven't done a very good job of mitigating some of these major conflicts of interest in order to systematically promote development. And the final thing, and I have to say this because we're in the home of NCFC, in our major cities, we've created more of a monopoly type environment for in youth soccer. And what that does is it reduces competition, not at the team level per se, that kind of competition, but around how our clubs operate. And we make it very difficult for people to create clubs. We make it very difficult for them to get games. We make it very difficult for them to support themselves. And this, in turn, reduces choice for parents, real choice for parents. I always say there's a lot of options, but very few choices. Real choice for parents. And it also makes lack of transparency. So if parents have a very difficult time comparing the value propositions of their local clubs, because they can't experience the differences because the environment is set up in such a way to favor the larger clubs, and it just makes it difficult.
All right. Now, Neil, where can parents find you online?
Yeah, so I have several Facebook groups. Anytime Soccer Training Facebook group. I have another one, Youth Soccer Youth Soccer Guest Playing Facebook group is very vibrant. And then the website is anytime-soccer.com. I do a podcast. Also, I just wrote an ebook on over 22 questions that parents should ask their soccer club. So I'll send that to you, and folks can download it, and they'll get all the information.
All right. Well, you've given us some great information, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule, and hopefully we can talk with you again soon.
Buford, it's been wonderful to be on the show, man. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak to you guys. And like I always say in my podcast, let's get better together.
All right.